Nathan here. Today I wanted to do a video talking about Cemu, which is a Wii U emulator that is not native to Linux, and I wanted to do a video showing how to install it for Linux and more specifically Gentoo. So the first thing that I want to talk about here is when it comes to Wii U emulators, there's really only two options. There's decaf EMU and there's Cemu. And Cemu is not a Linux native piece of software. It's actually Windows and maybe Mac. I'm not actually sure. And decaf EMU is Linux native, but in my experience, it hasn't really worked to the same degree that Cemu does. So thankfully, there is a process that you can go through to get Cemu to work perfectly, or at least perfectly in my experience, through Wine, and I'm going to be walking you through that today. So there's this GitHub repository, and I'll be linking all of these things in the description, but specifically, it talks about the steps involved, though the steps are phrased in a way that it would work for a Debian-based distribution. So for example, this is using apt. And most of these steps apply still, but a lot of them don't. And I'm going to walk you through just what I did to get the best possible success. So the first thing is they tell you to install Wine, just like a vanilla version of Wine. And what I noticed is that default Wine doesn't support Vulkan child windows. And what that means is when you go to open some program and the program wants to open a second window under the Vulkan interface, I guess, it doesn't work. Default Wine can't do that. So what you need is Wine TKG. Wine TKG isn't native to Gentoo as well. Like I couldn't find any e-builds for it, and I did try compiling it myself, but there were some issues with that. So what I found to be the best option were to actually go to Lutris and install Cemu that way. So the way that you do that is first you need to actually install Lutris. So if you take a look here, the Lutris eBuild, there's only testing versions of it for AMD 64. But it's a simple emerge. There's not really any use flag to worry about besides test, but you don't have to actually enable that. And once it's emerged, you can just leave that. So what you want to do is go to lutris.net and type Cemu so you can find the emulator. And you're going to want to go to Wine. And I'm going to do the one that's more recent, so the one published 3 weeks ago for me, which is 1.26.0. So you click install, and then you'll say choose application, and the one that should appear is Lutris. So you're going to open link, and I'm going to move over to another desktop while that opens. So here it is. It's going to give you, usually it won't give you this option, but because I already have Cemu installed here, we're going to do it through here again. And what it is basically prompting you with is, hey, this is what we want to install. So you can click install up here. And I'm going to name this something out. I'm going to say Cemu, and I'm going to put video there because it's going to be a separate install so I can remove it later. Though you can leave yours as Cemu. And it's going to show you what it intends to do here. So it wants to install these 5 files. And it's telling you basically either you download them or you can select a file that would replace it or be it. In this case, we're just going to leave everything alone and press continue. And we're going to let that run through a download. And this is pretty quick. And now it's going to open up Wine because it needs to install a custom version of Wine, in this case TKG, under its own special prefix while it prepares everything through the installation script. So we can let that run for a little bit. You can see everything that's going on here, and if there are any prompts, I'll be back. So without any intervention from myself, the installation has finished. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to close this because we don't actually want Cemu through Lutris. We just need its custom version of Wine. So for the time being, we're just going to leave this alone. So anyways, we can consider this part finished, the installation part. Now what we need to do is create a custom Wine instance. So, or a prefix rather. So if you want to just look up, I'm going to do that right here, create Wine prefix. It's a pretty simple process. You can find like a million tutorials, but I'm just gonna click on the very first one I see, which is addictive tips. Of course, I'll link this as well. We want a 64-bit wine prefix, And what we want to do is basically just signify what the prefix is, and then usually a wine command like wine cfg will take care of the actual creation process. So the reason I show this part is because if we look here, the next step is to run wine cfg. Now here's where it gets kind of weird. So what we need to do is we need to go to Cemu, we need to configure, and we go to runner options. We'll see that we have a version of wine here called Lutris FS-Hack 6.21-6, and that's the default. That's a really good wine version for what we want to do. So we're going to go find it. We're going to go to .local, share, Lutris, runners, and wine. And it's going to give you a list of all installed runners, which are like the versions of wine or whatever else that Lutris holds onto. We're going to enter the Lutris FS-Hack directory. And inside, you might notice this if you've ever used like custom versions of wine, but the directory looks like a custom installation. So we have the bin, lib, lib64, and share. Inside of the bin, we can actually find wine. So what we're going to do is we're going to enter the bin directory, and you can do this a couple ways. So you can either do print working directory, pwd, to get the full path, or you can ls and then type wine, or could you do one? I'm not remembering the proper way right now, but there's some way that you can get like a full directory. I'm just going to print the working directory right here and copy it, and we're going to basically use that. So we have it. Let's go back to our home folder and let's go create a prefix. So in my case, I'm going to create the prefix like this. So I'm going to set the environmental variable wine prefix equals, and then I'm going to paste the directory, because that's going to be, oh my bad. We're going to set the wine prefix to any directory we want. Let me rephrase that. So in this case, it's going to be home, and I'm just going to call it Cemu video wine. And then we're going to close that off, and we're going to say we want the version of wine that we're running to be here. So it's kind of confusing, but let me just go over it one more time, and I'll zoom in the terminal and I'll move Lutris out of the way. So the wine prefix, environmental variable, is the directory that we want to configure wine in. Now you want a custom one for this. This next part, we're setting the binary that we're opening. So in this case, we want to open wine cfg, but we want to open the one that's in our Lutris directory. So this is what my path looks like. It should look similar to you, and I showed you how to find it, but we want wine cfg from here. So we're going to go ahead and run that. And you'll see it's the wine configuration is being created in that directory that we set. And we're going to go back to the guide now, and it's going to tell us select Windows version 10 and apply. That's all we need to do here. So at the bottom right, you'll see Windows version 10. Apply that, press OK. We're done there. The next step is we need Winetricks. Now on Gentoo, Winetricks is something that you'll need to install. And I have the version right here, the Git version, but it doesn't matter what version you have. The important part is that we install the VC run. So again, what we're going to do, we're going to do wine prefix. We're going to set the existing wine prefix. And if you want, you can run bash beforehand. It doesn't seem like it actually is necessary in my experience. We're going to do Winetricks VC run 2017. Now for me, this might not work because I've already installed it. So it's probably going to run for a second to say, hey, it's already installed. You probably shouldn't have that, and then leave. Oh, it looks like it actually is willing to install. So we're going to press agree, press install, and setup successful. And then we're going to agree again and install, and we're done there. So you'll see right here, it's also listing the prefix out again. It's running all of these commands inside of this special prefix. This is where all of your wine stuff will be contained to. So back to the guide. We've installed Winetricks, and we've got the VC run 2017. So now we're on to Vulkan. Now, this was a little bit tricky for me initially. So Cemu, if you don't know, has two graphical options. You can choose OpenGL or you can choose Vulkan. The difference is OpenGL has some stuttering issues, while Vulkan should run fine. The issue, however, is that sometimes the default version of Vulkan I've found with the AMD GPU driver doesn't work, and you will get graphical issues. So we're going to ignore this here, and of course, we're going to take a look at the Gentoo wiki. So if you look at the Vulkan page, it's saying that you need to have the Vulkan use flag with Mesa, and then you have to install the Vulkan loader piece of software, and it shows you for each of these drivers how is Vulkan handled. You'll see Radeon, no Vulkan. Radeon SI, there's Vulkan, and it's the RAD-V integration. So if you want Vulkan, the open source one, to work, you need to go into your make.conf, and in your video cards, you'll see that I have it here. Along with AMD GPU, you need Radeon SI, and then you need the Vulkan use flag. Now, if you're using NVIDIA, there's the whole NVIDIA page, but it seems that the proprietary driver should cover everything that you need. And if you look at Vulkan on this page, it actually isn't even here. So I would have to imagine that Vulkan, there could also be a Vulkan driver separate, but still pertaining to it. I'm not really an expert on NVIDIA since I don't have an NVIDIA GPU at the moment, but NVIDIA honestly should have less issues than AMD in this regard, because AMD, you have more choices. Some of them are proprietary, some of them are open source, and they get kind of iffy. So on the AMD GPU page, it tells you that the Vulkan RAD-V driver is supported through Mesa, and that can work. And you should try it and see if it works. But in the case that it doesn't, we're going to really quickly go over how you get the proprietary one. And the way you do that is you go to the AMD GPU Pro page for Vulkan. So I did have to do a little bit of looking around to find what I was looking for, but it seems that the link was actually changed. Basically, what you find here now are installers for Ubuntu 21.40.2, or rather, that's the version of the driver for that version of Ubuntu. But if you go to this page, which again I'll leave a link to, you can find the old tar. So you're going to want to download this, and I already have it downloaded. And then we're going to continue on with this guide, or this wiki page rather. You're going to run a tar command on that. So we're going to go into our downloads folder and we're going to tar, and I use XVF. J doesn't seem to work for me in this case because it complains about not being the right kind of archive. And you're just going to want to extract this out, and mine's already extracted, but we're going to continue on. And we're going to enter the directory. And inside are a bunch of .deb files. And what we want is we want to type ARX, because we're unpacking the specific one, and we want the Vulkan AMD GPU AMD64.deb, and it's this one here. There are two that are relevant. And the difference is that one of them is AMD GPU, the other one is AMD GPU Pro. In this case, we need the AMD GPU Pro. So we're going to go ahead and run that. And then we're going to run tar xvf this data.tar.xz that's created. And it's going to spit out a bunch of stuff. And specifically what it gives us is this OPT directory. And inside of that directory is an AMD GPU Pro and then etc. And we keep going through Vulkan ICD, and then now we have this AMD.json, which is the file that we need specifically, the header. So what we're going to do is we're going to CP this whole directory. I'm doing it with doas, which is root privileges, this whole AMD GPU Pro, and we're going to put it in /opt, and you'll see I actually have it right here, AMD GPU Pro. So that's where this is going to get installed. And once we have that, we can continue on with the guide here. So we need to install CEMU now. To do that, we can either type this xdg open command, or you can just go to the link that I'll put in the description. Basically, it's just the CEMU directory, or website, my bad. And we're going to click download latest release version and save that to our computer. Once we have that, we're going to unzip CEMU. So the way they do it in this is they make a directory called CEMU. So I'm actually going to go and in my downloads folder make a temp directory. we're going to copy Cemu. I actually have to download it. Home, downloads, temp. So we're going to basically download that to this directory. Let me make the terminal a little bigger. And then, as the guide says, we're going to unzip it and let that run. So Cemu is unzipped. And if you want it to be cleaner, what you can do is you can mv move the directory so it's like called Cemu, and we can remove this archive now and enter the directory. And inside we have a bunch of stuff. So it's basically just what you would get on Windows. It's the whole thing, so there's no installer involved, thankfully. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to grab the graphics packs. So we're going to go to this link. Oh, my bad. I want this one to stay open. Go to this link here. Open it in a new tab. And it's going to have the graphics packs. So we're just going to go ahead and grab a zip of the graphics packs and drop that onto our computer. And we need to unzip them. So unzip, and then we're going to go to the archive we're unzipping. We're going to follow that with -D, and we're going to put that into the graphics packs directory. So now if we look into our graphics packs, we should have a bunch of stuff. This is all of the graphics packs, and you'll see what these are used for later, but you're definitely going to want these. And now we're getting onto the part where we actually get to run the program. So by default, it wants us to do a couple things. It wants us to set the VBlank mode, set the Mesa GL thread, R600 debug, and then whine. We have a little bit more of a complicated job. What we need to do here is we need to do whine prefix. We have to set it. And then we have to do this whole whine directory. So remember how we had our existing Lutris runners, blah, 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 over to whine instead of whine CFG. And then we select Cemu, but we're not done yet because now we have to set the rest of the environmental variables. Now I prefer just to copy paste them from here. My bad, that's not the combination. Here we are. And then when you're ready, you can give it a launch. And you'll find everything seems to work, or at least the program opens. Now it wants you to get a bunch of different stuff here, or at least it tells you you can. But for now, we're just going to say next, don't touch anything, and just close out this. So we have Cemu open. Now it's kind of a buggy UI, but that's what you have to deal with when you run something through whine like this. Regardless, what this is basically saying, in case you can't read it like you can't on mine, it's saying that you have to add a game path, and we can just change our settings. So first thing I want to go through really quickly is the settings. If we go to the graphics settings, set your graphics API to Vulkan as mine is here, and you'll see that there are two options, the graphics devices. There's the AMD RAD-V, and there's the actual device. This bottom one, the RAD-V, is the open source driver, and this top one here is the closed source one. In my experience with my graphics card, the closed source one works much better than the open source one does. And the other thing is in input. So go up to options and go to input settings. When you go to set the input for something, click on emulated controller and set it to, at least in my experience, Wii U Pro controller works best. And then you want to add one. You can either press the plus or the drop down. When you click API, go to SDL controller and just select what comes up. And if you have UDEV properly set up on your computer, your controller should just work. I'm right now using a PS5 controller plugged in through USB. As long as UDEV is properly installed on your computer, it should work out. You may need to use the UDEV input use flag, like input devices flag, but that should have everything working. And the final step really is the play with performance tab. And you can follow that if you like, and you probably should. But what it requires is basically these flags that we already added here and some graphics packs. But besides that, CEMU should be working. And the other thing is I can't show you in this video how to get games through CEMU or how to get any sort of firmware or whatever you need. You're going to have to find that out on your own, because that's the pirating side of it all, or the ROM dumping or whatever you're planning on doing, and I'm not able to really endorse or guide you through that part. But this will get you running with the legal aspect of it, which is getting the emulator working, and it should help you jump through some of the hoops that I had to spend a while working on, so hopefully this helped. All the links will be in the description. If you like the video, give it a like. If you want to see more content, consider subscribing. If you have any questions, you can comment, or you can join my Discord, link in the description, and you can ask for help there, and I may be able to assist. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.